They laughed at the palace guard. 10 seconds later, no one was breathing. Welcome to the channel where every story leaves a mark. Today's tale isn't just about skill. It's about silence, discipline, and the moment respect is earned, not asked for. But before we dive in, tell us, where are you watching from? We love seeing this global community grow, one comment at a time. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, because tomorrow's story is something you won't want to miss. It's got heart, grit, and a twist that just might leave you speechless. Now, let's begin. The wind rolled gently over the countryside, brushing across open fields and carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass and spent gunpowder. It was Open Range Weekend, an annual event where civilians, veterans, and enthusiasts gathered to trade stories, test their skills, and share their love for firearms. Tables were lined with spotting scopes and gear bags. Spent casings glinted under the pale English sky, like fragments of yesterday's battles left behind in the dirt. Among the crowd was James Callahan, 36 years old, standing quietly near the fence line. Dressed in a plain black windbreaker and faded boots that had seen both parades and patrols, he blended in. Just another face in a crowd of weekend shooters. But beneath the surface, Callahan was anything but ordinary. A serving member of the Queen's Company, Coldstream Guards. He had completed 3 combat deployments before being posted to ceremonial duties at Buckingham Palace. Still, he wasn't here to talk about that. He wasn't here to be noticed. A half-finished cup of tea rested beside him, long gone cold. His eyes, steady and calm, scanned the firing line. He watched each shooter's stance, their breathing, the way their fingers curled over the trigger. He made no noise, no commentary. He simply observed, silent and still, the same way he stood during the changing of the guard, unmoved even as tourists posed inches from his face. At the center lane, though, there was nothing quiet about Blake. Voss, 42, was a former private contractor who now spent more time selling courses and posting to social media than he did behind enemy lines. He wore a crisp tactical vest, wraparound sunglasses, and a titanium watch that caught the sunlight every time he gestured. His rifle, a custom setup with all the bells and whistles, carbon fiber barrel, military-grade scope, match-grade trigger, looked like it had never seen a drop of dust. Every time he fired a shot, he turned dramatically to his small crowd of admirers, flashing a cocky smile. "That's how it's done, gentlemen," he boomed, as another shell casing pinged against the concrete like a coin hitting marble. "Precision like this? You don't get it in the Army. This is private contractor skill, combat-tuned, real-world, tested." The younger men around him chuckled, nodding along as if they were hearing gospel. One handed him a water bottle, another asked about the scope settings. Voss soaked in the attention like it was sunlight. Then his eyes landed on Callahan, UI, one of the range staff. He called out, squinting in mock confusion. Callahan didn't respond. He simply shook his head once. That was all Voss needed to get started. "Oh, wait. Are you one of those royal guards?" He smirked. "Palace boy. Do they let you shoot real guns now, or are you just here to pose for the brochure?" A few people laughed. Not loud, not mean, but just enough to sting. Enough to make Callahan the punchline of a joke he never asked to be part of. Callahan didn't flinch. His expression remained still, neutral. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides. To those who didn't know better, it might have looked like he didn't care. But to a trained eye, it was discipline in its purest form. The kind that doesn't break under pressure, because it was forged under fire. What Voss didn't know was that Callahan had trained for moments far tenser than this. He'd stood in dust storms under enemy fire, measuring wind speed with his skin and silence. He didn't need fancy gear or an audience. He had something else. Patience. And for now, he would wait. Because sometimes you don't earn respect by stepping forward. Sometimes you earn it by standing still, until the right moment comes. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the field and painting the shooting range in muted gold. Voices carried softly over the wind, some calling out distances, others trading tips or small talk. But around lanes 7 through 9, all attention remained quietly fixed on one thing: the standoff that hadn't quite become a confrontation. Blake Voss wasn't done. Still riding the high of his last shot and the crowd's laughter, he strutted back toward his table. He unscrewed the cap of a sports drink with one hand while wiping down his rifle with the other, like a man polishing a trophy. Then he looked over again, right at James Callahan. "You sure you're not here to guard the parking lot?" Voss called out, grinning wide. "Or maybe Buckingham sent you here to hold the range signpost." Another round of laughs broke out. Not everyone joined in, but no one spoke up either. The line between teasing and bullying was starting to blur, but the target remained silent. Callahan sat on a wooden bench now, posture upright, hands resting calmly on his knees. His expression hadn't changed. No anger, no embarrassment. Just observation, focused and still. But beneath that stillness was a man trained to calculate more than bullet trajectory. He could measure a room by breath, by tone, by what wasn't being said. Off to the side, an older man, silver-haired, upright, with the unmistakable bearing of a military career, watched it all unfold. His eyes narrowed. He'd seen this scene before. The loudest guy in the room mistaking silence for weakness. He tapped his fingers against his knee, not with impatience, but with rhythm. A march, maybe. A memory. A younger shooter leaned toward his buddy and whispered, "Why are they giving that guy such a hard time?" "Royal Guard," the friend replied with a shrug. "You know, red coats, funny hats, just for tourists. They don't really do anything." The whisper wasn't quiet enough. Callahan heard it. But again, he gave no reaction. Voss wasn't letting up. "You know what?" he announced, tossing his towel aside. "Let's settle this, you and me, one shot each, moving target, 240 yards. That was 218 meters, but he didn't bother with metric. He was playing to the crowd. "You'll go second," he continued with a smirk. "That way you can watch how a real shooter does it, Buckingham." People turned now. This was no longer background noise. The tone had shifted. Something sharp was in the air, an edge to the moment. Even the range officer looked over, sensing tension tightening like a bowstring. Callahan looked up. Slowly, calmly. No drama, just presence. "I'm just here to observe," he said, voice quiet, measured. "Yeah, figured," Voss shot back. "Window dressings don't handle real steel." More laughter, but now it was less certain. Uneasy. A few in the crowd looked down at their boots. A few more turned to the older gentleman, who hadn't moved an inch but whose gaze had sharpened. He finally stepped forward. "Excuse me, son," he said to Callahan, his voice gravel but respectful. "You one of the grenadiers?" Callahan turned his head slightly and gave a small nod. "Queen's Company, Coldstream." That was all he said, but that was enough. The old man nodded once, understanding instantly. A Royal Marine himself, he knew. What those words meant. Not parade fluff, combat pedigree, real service. He turned his head to Voss, his expression unreadable. "You ever serve?" Voss shrugged with a confident smirk. "Private contractor. Did security in Iraq, totally different game." The Marine tilted his head, subtle but pointed. "Yeah, I imagine it is." The words weren't loud, but they landed heavy. Like lead. Something shifted. Not in the sky, not on the ground, in the people. Respect doesn't make noise when it enters a room, but everyone feels it. Blake Voss tapped his rifle against the table like a man sealing a bet. "Tell you what," he said loudly enough. "For half the range to here, I'll even let you borrow my target, you know, so you don't waste a bullet on your ceremonial scarecrow drills." The crowd had grown quiet now, not out of awe, but discomfort. The joke had gone stale. Even those who laughed earlier were shifting on their feet. What started as mockery had become something uglier. Still, James Callahan didn't move. He sat still, back straight, boots planted, watching the line like a man taking mental notes. There was no tension in his shoulders, no fire in his eyes, just a stillness that made some people nervous without knowing why. Voss leaned in again. "Come on, soldier boy. Don't make me call Buckingham Palace for permission." It was too much. Callahan stood, not with speed, not in anger. He simply stood, straightened his jacket, adjusted the duffel strap on his shoulder, and walked. He didn't speak, didn't respond. He just moved, quietly, deliberately, toward the shooting line. And every head turned with him. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't even speak. Because something about the way he walked told them this wasn't for show. The range officer, an older man with sleeves rolled and clipboard in hand, met him halfway. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, voice low, respectful. Callahan looked at the weapon rack behind him. "You have an L85A2? The officer blinked. "Standard issue? Yeah." "Iron sights. No attachments," Callahan added. Someone nearby scoffed. "No scope? He won't even hit paper." But others knew better, especially the older ones. One of them leaned toward his son and whispered, "Watch his hands, that's real training." The Marine from earlier was nodding slowly. "That's what they qualify with," he muttered. "In the field, under pressure." The officer handed over the weapon. Military stock, no frills, nothing polished. A tool, not a trophy. Callahan took it in both hands like someone greeting an old friend. No testing the balance, no practice. Swings, just calm, familiar motions. He checked the chamber, adjusted the sling, folded the bipod. Every move precise, silent muscle memory from years of repetition. At the other end of the range, Voss snorted and prepped his custom rifle again. "Probably, just luck if he hits anything," he mumbled to the man beside him. "Ceremonial shooters don't train like we do." The Marine tilted his head. "You sure about that?" Voss didn't answer. Targets were reset. This time a silhouette, a human-shaped profile on a moving track at 240 yards, mounted behind a set of barriers. It would zip across the range laterally, no pattern, no warning. Last time, Voss clipped the edge, barely. Now all eyes were on Callahan. He stepped to the line, not for applause, not for pride, just for something deeper, something the uniform demanded even when no one else understood. He dropped prone with fluid grace, settled the rifle into his shoulder and stared downrange. His breathing slowed, measured, controlled. One hand adjusted elevation, once, then stopped. He didn't chase the flags. He didn't overthink, because he'd already done the math. He'd spent the last 2 hours watching every shooter, tracking how the crosswinds bent their rounds. He didn't need warm-ups. He had data, discipline, and the kind of calm you can't teach, you have to earn it. The crowd leaned in. Phones were down now. Conversations had stopped. Even the trees seemed to hush. The rig kicked into motion, fast. Radek, the target zipped out from behind a screen, sliding across the open field. Callahan didn't flinch. He exhaled, then fired. One shot, a sharp, clean crack that echoed through the valley, and then silence. Not even wind. The shot echoed like a verdict. Sharp, clean, final. The moving target jerked, then stopped. Dead center. Not a graze, not a lucky nick. Just one perfect. Surgical strike. Center mass, exactly where a soldier is trained to aim when it counts most. For a second, no one said a word. No applause, no comments. Just silence, as if the entire range had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Even Blake Voss, still crouched beside his heavily modified rifle, blinked and squinted through his scope, like it had to be a trick. The range officer walked over to the screen at the observation post, lips pressed tight. He stared at the mark. Zoomed in once, then again. Finally, he looked up and said it flatly, almost like he didn't believe it himself. 2/3 of an inch off dead center. Military gold standard. Cleanest shot of the day. No optics. That was it. The crowd murmured, not loud, but low and shifting, like the wind had changed direction. A few heads turned toward Callahan, now standing calmly at the line, brushing gravel dust from his sleeve. He wasn't smiling, wasn't basking in glory. He simply clicked the safety on, returned the L85A2 to the table, and stepped back. He didn't raise his hands, didn't bow, didn't even glance at Voss, because for him this wasn't a win. It was just another qualification, another shot done right. A man near the back gave a quiet single clap. Another joined in. Not the kind of cheering that fills stadiums, just the kind that comes from respect, real, earned, wordless. Someone turned to the Marine and asked, "That normal for these guys?" The older man chuckled softly. "No, that's not normal. That's standard. For him." Voss stood up slowly, jaw set, his earlier swagger gone, replaced by something more quiet, uneasy. He stared at the target, then at the rifle in his hands. Someone tried to hand him a towel, but he didn't take. Instead, he walked a few feet toward Callahan, just close enough to speak. "I didn't know you guys actually trained like that," he muttered, forcing eye contact. Callahan didn't gloat, didn't offer a smug reply. He simply extended his hand. "We all serve in different ways," he said. The gesture was clean, respectful, an off-ramp from humiliation. Voss hesitated, then took the hand. Grip firm, no bravado, just acknowledgement. Someone nearby asked the question. Many had been thinking, "Why didn't you say anything earlier when he was going off on you?" Callahan looked at the young man, not with contempt, but with clarity. "Because if I needed their respect," he said, gesturing toward the field, "I'd have lost it already." The words settled in the air like ash. He didn't mean he didn't care. He meant real respect. Doesn't come from defending yourself in the moment. It comes from standing still when it's easier to shout, from letting your actions speak when everyone else is trying to be loud. The Marine gave a small nod, voice low but proud. That's the uniform. That's why it matters. And in that moment, the jokes stopped. The comments about mannequins and funny hats, gone. Even the ones who never said a word shifted their stance, a little more open now, a little more upright. Because what they saw today wasn't a red coat with a bayonet. It was a soldier. One who trained in silence, showed up without announcement, and left with nothing but respect in his wake. Callahan didn't linger. He zipped up his duffel, slung it over his shoulder, and made for the gravel path. No one followed. Not because they didn't want to, but because they understood. You don't chase a moment like that, you carry it with you. The gravel crunched beneath James Callahan's boots as he made his way toward the lot. His duffel hung over one shoulder, shifting slightly with each step. The same silence that had followed his shot now followed him. Not cold, not empty, but reverent. No one spoke. Not yet. Some just watched, as if unsure whether they'd witnessed a moment or imagined it. He reached the edge of the range when a voice called out behind him. "Sergeant." It was the retired Royal Marine, hands in his jacket pockets, walking with the slow, deliberate cadence of someone who'd spent decades. In formation, Callahan turned. "Sir?" "You said Queen's Company, Coldstream," the Marine said. "That's real service, active, not just ceremony." Callahan gave a respectful nod. "Yes, sir. 2 deployments, then London, public duties, Buckingham, Windsor, Horse Guards." The Marine gave a low whistle, shaking his head. "And the shooting. That's just part of it." Callahan nodded again. "Live fire every quarter. Rifle qualifications every 6 months. Urban simulation, threat scenarios. We're ceremonial. Second. Infantry first." The Marine smiled, not broadly, but with quiet pride. "I wish more people knew that." Callahan shrugged, voice calm. "I don't mind that they don't." "Why's that?" "Because it's not my job to correct them," Callahan replied. "It's my job to be ready, if they're ever wrong at the wrong moment." The Marine held his gaze, and for a beat they didn't say a word. They didn't need to. Behind them, Blake Voss had lingered, red-faced but composed. He took a breath, then stepped forward, not with his usual swagger, but with humility. "I didn't mean to disrespect," Voss said, voice clipped but honest. "I just didn't realize what you guys actually did." Callahan turned, extended a hand once more. We all serve in different ways. Voss hesitated for only a moment, then took it. It wasn't just a handshake, it was a release, an exit ramp from pride and posturing. Callahan gave it freely. Someone in the crowd, still watching from a distance, spoke the question out loud this time. But why didn't you say anything when he was talking down to you? Callahan turned to face the group. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Because if I needed their respect, he said, nodding toward the firing line, I'd have already lost it. The words hit like truth. He didn't stay for applause, didn't bask in vindication. He simply tightened the strap on his shoulder, nodded once to the Marine, and turned toward his car. From the clubhouse, the range officer was already marking the hit on the board. No name, just a small note, 240 yards, center mass. No optics. The Marine looked over, then said quietly, "Let it stand. People will ask." A younger shooter nearby spoke up. "Think he'll come back next weekend?" The Marine shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. But if I ever see that red coat again, I'll remember what's underneath it." Out in the lot, Callahan opened the trunk of his car, placed his duffel inside, removed his jacket, and shut the lid with the same quiet precision he used on the range. He didn't look back, not because it didn't matter, but because the moment had already said enough. He'd answered every insult, every assumption, with one shot, one breath, one act of discipline, and that was all he needed. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Would you have spoken up, or waited for the right moment to show who you really are? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, and what moment in today's story hit you the hardest. Was it the silence, the shot, or the final handshake that said more than any argument ever could? This isn't just a story about a rifle range. It's about how real strength often doesn't announce itself. It waits, it listens. And when the time is right, it acts with precision. Have you ever met someone who surprised you with their quiet strength? Someone who earned your respect without raising their voice? Share your experience below. Your story might inspire someone else reading the comments right now. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story might just be the one that stays with you. And if you know someone who still thinks ceremonial uniforms mean soft soldiers, send this their way. Let them see what real discipline, humility, and service look like. No words needed. We read every comment, every single one. So let your voice be heard.